big guy.
Today we get to one of the more interesting points in the Scenario B of Resident Evil 2, technically the final boss with Mr. X, who previous to this point, if you hadn't seen this before, I actually don't really know what he was doing. Last time that we saw him, we were in the garbage disposal aspect of the science facility. He came from nowhere, possibly fell down a shaft to where Claire was, along with the perpetually useless Sherry. He punched a button which activated the self-destruct, which the player didn't see up until now, and then he was either pushed or tripped into the giant vat of lava that Umbrella keeps around in its facility for some reason. I thought that this was a facility for science. I don't know why the hell you need metallurgy shit just laying around, but whatever. Obviously that didn't kill Mr. X, and so we unfortunately have to go through this stupid-ass boss fight. It is an odd moment because this boss fight is almost completely screwed over by Capcom itself. Capcom made something great and then completely fucked it over by the end of it. The problem is that Mr. X is being fought in this tiny-ass room, and as typical as it is for a tyrant-based enemy in this franchise, he has a ton of sweeping punching attacks, a ton of range, and he's being fought in a tiny-ass room. The problem is that at this point he's almost completely immortal, and you probably don't have the best of your ammunition to hand. Also, probably don't have the best weapon, since Capcom didn't leave them lying around in preparation for this boss fight. So, if you don't have anything to fight with and you're out of resources, the best thing that you can do is to run around the room in circles and hope that Mr. X doesn't hit you. You have to keep that up for around a minute and a half, before the other part of the boss fight commences, and Ada Wong just produces a rocket launcher out of thin air and throws it to Claire, who has to pick it up and then somehow peg Mr. X with one of the shots. And in desperation, it is actually pretty easy to make this thing miss, even though it has around 3 or 4 bullets in it. If you somehow manage to miss with every shot, then you are pretty much fucked. Like other rocket launchers seen in this series, it takes a while to set up. You have to go through the animation of setting it up. All the while, Mr. X has tons of time in the world to claw your face off. But if you manage to get everything perfect, then Mr. X will die literally the exact same death as the tyrant from the original Resident Evil, which I call bullshit on Capcom. Did you really frickin' think that you could copy-paste the ending of the first game to the second one? Seriously? Yeah, it's pretty much the exact same thing, subtract a helicopter. But the bigger problem is the first part of this boss fight, where it's incredibly difficult and stupidly designed. You aren't given any resources to prep for it, even though this is one of the toughest, most painful bosses in the entire game. If you're not playing on easy mode, then you could pretty much easily be cut into little ribbons just by being caught by a few attacks, which you got caught by because you can't really see Mr. X's attack animations, you can't dodge or block, so you just kinda have to hope that luck is on your side while running around this goddamn room, because you don't have the time or the bullets to actually start shooting at Mr. X, and you just have to wait out the frickin' clock. It is so stupidly annoying, mostly because there was no frickin' logical need for this room to be this small. There's no point to it. You could have made this room even just 15 square feet bigger, remove some of the corners, and been perfectly fine. This room has too many corners. Okay? It doesn't make any frickin' sense to make it like this for a boss that is this fast, this clobber happy, and just this frankly absurdly annoying. Like, this is one of the stupidest ways to end the game. And I know that Resident Evil games in the past have had pretty abysmally stupid final bosses because they're trying to marry the resource upkeep and the difficulty curve at the end. So either they give you a ton of resources to make the boss fight possible, or they just make the boss so stupidly simple to beat that it's almost completely pointless that it exists in the first place. Because what's the point of having a final boss if it's so simple to kill because you're worried that people will not have the resources necessary because you aren't giving them to them by the end of it to beat the rest of the game? There are so many simple ways that Capcom could have just circumvented this entire problem, but they went head first into it and made frankly, one of the worst, most badly designed bosses in the entire game, which again is a shame because if Resident Evil can do anything, it is super badass monster designs, but it gets completely fucked over by the impossibly and stupidly moronic design of Resident Evil 2's final scene. Just completely out of nowhere, a Deus Ex Machina insta-kill weapon is just dropped from nowhere and that's how the fight ends. Like, they literally couldn't think of any sort of gameplay balancing or any sort of gameplay scripting, so they just threw the solution at you. All you need to do is hit him with one shot and the whole thing's over. That's not a final boss. You might as well have just had a final hit this to end the entire game button, not a giant enemy that you put all this effort into, but all the effort goes into this shitty ass fucking boss fight. This wasn't enjoyable by any frickin' metric, and was one of the worst ways that this could have ended. And even though Scenario B was definitely a worse time off than Scenario A, with Mr. X and William Birkin still hanging around, you could have done something with this, Capcom. There is no way that you couldn't have salvaged this. Couldn't have built something from this that was fun and super exciting, because kinda with the elements that we already have, we can see that you were going for super exciting, but the gameplay doesn't match. Okay, you need to build the gameplay into the animations and into the difficulty to actually get everything running how it's supposed to be. With this boss fight going, there are so many gears just gnashing against each other and fighting each other that it just ruins the entire thing. And unfortunately, that's how Scenario B ends, with Mr. X dying a bullshit death, Claire barely surviving by the skin of her teeth, and the player probably moreover just annoyed at everything because they still have to deal with the 5-minute countdown, and if you waited for the entire time because you didn't have any bullets to get the rocket launcher, you probably don't have a lot of time left. You probably only have 3 minutes. Get in the damn train, we need to get the hell out of here before everything just explodes for no reason.